Hello and welcome to another Matura Express English stream. Today we have a really high amount of delay since there were some super major technical difficulties. Since we have a new studio, there were some difficulties. Anyhow, we try to do the stream, or I try to do the stream as best as I can. Having said enough, let's start with the topic of today, talking about tolerance. So, as I've already told you in the introduction, we're gonna talk about tolerance today in the English A-level exam. Today's topic will focus at first on an overview of the topic tolerance. So we're gonna have a detailed look into the things you have to know. Then we're gonna have a look at the definitions of tolerance, stereotypes, and discrimination. Furthermore, we're gonna have a look at discrimination nowadays. Then we talk about a little bit about movements movements nowadays versus movements in the past. So specifically gonna talk about more positive movements that are of course connected with discrimination or tolerance or stereotypes. And then at last, we're gonna have a look at the demonstration exam analysis. And the demonstration exam is about discrimination and racism. Okay, so basically what you should know for the exam, or which topics the topic tolerance covers, will be given to you by your teacher, of course, or should have been given you already by your trainer or teacher, doesn't matter. But I'm gonna tell you anyhow. So basically the topic tolerance has a few chapters out of the book Berufsreifeprüfung für die Berufsreifeprüfung, English for the Berufsreifeprüfung, Hauptmodul, and so on and so on. You all know the book, I guess, and you all have the book, or you should have the book. And basically there are 3 chapters with different sub-chapters you have to know. The first topic is basically, or chapter is tolerance and discrimination. I've written out the pages so that you can easily go to those pages, go to those chapters and have a look at them. And of course, not just have a look at them, but you should also study the things that are in those chapters. So tolerance and discrimination basically includes discrimination, minorities, migration. Then we have another important topic, especially nowadays, or for comparison to nowadays and the past, important is men and women. And then we have another chapter called Stand Up for Your Rights, which is about human rights, children's issues and children's rights, and human rights organizations. And it covers basically a lot of topics. I've listed here human rights violations, child labor, child soldiers, and the Declaration of Human Rights and the Declaration of Rights of the Child, which is quite important, I think, to know and have some knowledge about. It's really easy to gain some additional knowledge to those topics, since there are a lot of articles and definitions and discussions out there on the internet, in books, here at the Matura Express, at your Wi-Fi course, and so on. So, definitions of tolerance, stereotypes, and the discrimination, I have accessed basically two online dictionaries. The first one is Merriam-Webster, and the second one is the famous Oxford Dictionaries. And tolerance is defined as a sympathy or indulgence for beliefs or practices differing from or conflicting with one's own. So I think that's a very clear-cut definition, not super fancy that you couldn't understand it. Then stereotype basically is defined as a standardized mental picture that is held in common by members of a group and that represents an oversimplified opinion, prejudice, attitude, or uncritical judgment. So, of course, you all know about stereotypes, but I think a very easy definition here too. And the last definition, discrimination, which is from Oxford Dictionaries, the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, especially on the groups of race, age, or sex. Prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, yeah. Keep that in mind. Those definitions are important, or you should be able to somehow define it. You don't have to learn those definitions by heart, but you should be able to define the terms, know what you're talking about, especially when it comes to the dialogue, but also the monologue. You should be able to have a knowledge about those terms and what you're really talking about. Well, discrimination nowadays, I think it was a really hard chapter or a really hard slide to prepare. There is a lot of discrimination going on, actually. And the things I've came up with, or that struck me first, is basically minority groups, with which I basically mean refugees. So most of the time when we talk about refugees, it's all about people come to our country, and politicians think that, not all politicians of course, but mainly right-winged politicians think that they shouldn't have the ability to stay here or have the consent from the state to stay in the country. And of course, refugees are often seen as scapegoats for different issues societies face. In this case, it's the society of different countries. It seems that refugees can be accused of being any scapegoat, or can be accused of being anything, any problem that the state faces in a different situation. And of course, all the right-wing politicians use it to their benefit and do make policies and try to get rid of those people. So what I've also came up with is that politicians want to stop the influx of immigrants, mainly because of the growing fear that people from other countries swamp, or peoples from other countries, quote, swamp, unquote, their home country. We have our interior minister is a right-wing politician. We have our minister president is some sort of right-wing politician. So we face same situations here in Austria, and of course in the United States there is Trump. In Hungary there is Orban. And in Germany there are a lot of others. In France there's Le Pen, and yeah, you all know about them, and they basically use propaganda for their benefit, and as we see, unfortunately, it works out quite well for them. But I'm not here to discuss any politics with you. I'm here to discuss about discrimination nowadays. And I'm gonna move on to gender inequality. We all know that unfortunately women still get discriminated because of their gender, be it in a job, be it in a job application, be it in public, be it with different stereotypes. So in this case, we all know that women get lower wages than men, even if they have the same qualifications, which I know that for the University of Innsbruck is not true, since they choose if they have the same amount of qualification, men and women get chosen over men. So that's their policy, which is quite good, I think. Then they have limited access to jobs, actually, since not every company or institution as the University of Innsbruck has such policies. And of course, gender inequality is basically caused by antiquated stereotypes and antiquated beliefs of gender roles. Yeah, and it's always a thing of that people don't really want to change, or yeah. It's unfortunate. It has become better, but there is still some way to go. We all hope that in the near future there will be equal wages, and there will be equal chances for women, and there will be enough respect towards women. And of course, last but not least, that the stereotypes will hopefully soon vanish at both sides, but of course with women it's way more intense. So movements nowadays versus movements in the past. What I've came up with is that nowadays there is a strong LGBTQ movement, which, for those of you who don't know, it's the abbreviation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer and questioning movement. It has gained a lot of momentum recently, or the last 10 years, I guess. Of course, I think it came up in the 70s maybe, or in the 80s. I'm not sure. So no guarantee here. Another movements are strong female movements, especially nowadays or the last 20 years. Of course, we all know about the suffragettes in the early 20th century, which started in England, which were basically movements where women wanted to have the right to vote. So a very basic right they were excluded from. And nowadays, of course, thankfully, women don't have to argue about that anymore. But of course, there is a lot to argue about other things I've mentioned before. So there's a really strong movement, female movement and feminist movement going on. And of course, against racism, since racism has become a really big thing, although we in Austria and Germany and other countries in Central Europe have experienced the atrocities of World War II, there is still a lot of racism going on and exclusion of people from different countries, which is, of course, a counter movement of this racism is against racism. There is a lot going on too. So thankfully, and a lot of people, there are still a lot of people that try to fight against racism. So very good too. And past movement, suffragette movement, very basic movement. Declaration of Rights of the Child actually was signed in 1959. Human rights, I think the Declaration of Human Rights was, I don't know when they were signed, but it was quite early too. But it, of course, can be seen as a single event, since movements are developments over few decades. So if you have, of course, any questions or any ideas about past movements and movements nowadays, just let us know in the comments below, and we try to get back to them as soon as possible. Now I'm gonna show you a demonstration exam about discrimination and racism. So in this very exam, of course, we start with the introduction. We all know that. Task 1 is about types of discrimination. In this situation, you should define discrimination. Very important. Different types of discrimination and possible reasons for discrimination. So here we have the definition I've talked about. And task 2 is about racism. That's the dialogue conversation. In this case, you're discussing the questions from a listener about racist bullying. Racist bullying, of course, there is something like this, unfortunately. And you, of course, have the text, in this case, recorded number of UK children excluded from racist bullying. So a very interesting topic, I think. And of course, there is the follow-up discussion after it. So be sure to know, in this case, the discrimination, bullying, racist bullying. I think it's really easy to talk about it and find information about it on the internet. As I've said just before, if you have any questions, ask us, and that's basically it for today, for this stream. And yeah, I wish you a very pleasant evening, and see you next week. Bye.